Hi, Kevin Coop here, and this is FaceTime with the Content Guy. So last week I had the opportunity to spend a little time with Tim Simmons of the Private Label Manufacturers Association. And the reason I did that is PLMA basically does a regular email in which they do interviews with industry leaders about very specific subjects. Now, I would never refer to myself as an industry leader, but I know a little bit about e-commerce, so they asked me to be part of that series. I was happy to do it. So instead of my usual FaceTime with the Content Guy this week, I'm going to basically turn it over to Tim for this interview that he did with me about the subject of e-commerce and Amazon and its effect on the food industry. I hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to PLMA Live's monthly interview. I'm your host, Tim Simmons. Once upon a time, the word Amazon referred only to a long river in South America. Well, the Amazon we know now is a retailing juggernaut that is leading an online revolution that is scaring the heck out of bricks-and-mortar retailers. Our guest today has been closely following the growth of Amazon and has some definite opinions about why it's been so successful and how bricks-and-mortar stores can compete against it. He's Kevin Coop, the founder and content guy of Morning Newsbeat. It's a daily online blog that has developed a loyal audience for nearly 15 years. He has also authored books on retailing, which incidentally you can buy on Amazon. Kevin, welcome to PLMA Live. We all know that Amazon has come to dominate book retailing and has had a big impact on mass merchandisers such as Walmart. But how much success has Amazon had when it comes to selling groceries?
When you look at Amazon's success in the food area and perishables, it all sort of depends on how you define success. At this point, I think the numbers I've seen recently, less than 1% of all grocery sales in the U.S. are online. So it's a relatively small piece of the pie comparatively. But that said, they have made the decision internally there that they're going to be much more aggressive about food. Just because food they've not been as ambitious and aggressive there, they've obviously done a lot of other things first, doesn't mean the success they've had in all those other categories can't be replicated when it comes to food. Food's a little tougher. I mean, clearly, there's a lot of other challenges, especially when you get into things that are perishable or have expiration dates. It's a different animal. But they've clearly made the decision that's what they're going to focus on.
Does Amazon have a clear strategy to build its grocery business?
One of the things that is one of the things that they've done over the past few years is they've built these distribution centers all over the country because they want to be in as many markets as possible. By putting them in those areas, they can add refrigeration, they can add freezer space very, very easily. They're doing everything they can to kind of smooth out the path so they can get products to people faster. And that plays into their food strategy very carefully. The first thing you have to understand about Amazon in terms of what they're trying to do is understand the notion of what an ecosystem is, because that's essentially what they're trying to do, and that's one of the reasons that food's so important. Amazon is trying to create this ecosystem where they're going to be the first best choice for consumers in virtually any category. They want you to go to Amazon first.
Kevin, 1% isn't a big number. What percentage is Amazon aiming for in its grocery business?
First of all, the 1% number that I talked about before, that's total. That's not just Amazon, that's total. If Amazon could get 2% of total U.S. grocery sales, that is a grand slam home run for them. They don't need a big piece of the pie to make a lot of money on this.
Has Amazon changed its approach to the grocery business over the years?
The Amazon Fresh model has evolved in a lot of different ways. When they first started in Seattle a number of years ago, one of the things they wanted to do is they wanted to be very careful about the products they were sending out to people. So they hired produce guys from retailers who were in the warehouse to make sure, no, we're not going to send that banana. We're not going to send those tomatoes. They don't look good. That has changed as they've kind of grown. They don't have the same experts in a lot of their warehouses around the country. So I think it's a slower growth pattern. And they've had issues about out of stocks, things like that. But they're also experimenting with a lot of different ways to ship products to people. It used to be everything was going by UPS and FedEx. Well, now they have their own vans in a lot of these markets. They're testing the idea of using Uber-type drivers in some of those markets. And again, we haven't even started to talk about drones.
What is the biggest strength that Amazon brings to the grocery business?
Amazon creates a relationship. And most people don't think of it that way. But the algorithms that they've built into their business model that allow them to examine everything you do and everything that you buy allows them to create a relationship with the consumer that is, in my view, far better than the relationship that virtually any retailer, let's say in my area, has with me. I mean, might walk into a retailer 2 or 3 times a week. They really don't know who I am. And even if I use a card to get a discount, very rare that they actually, they actually act on the information that I'm giving them by using the card.
What's one of the biggest misconceptions that people have about Amazon's business model?
One of the criticisms, it's funny, I hear criticism about Amazon all the time. Oh, that's a bad business to be in because there's no impulse sales. My argument is anybody who ever said that has not used Amazon to any great degree. I probably buy more impulse stuff because of them, because they come to me and say, oh, you might like this book, you might like this movie, you might like this, you might like that. Oh yeah, I'd try that, absolutely. And so, the biggest downside is I buy too much. You become almost addicted to it.
Some of the big retailers, such as Walmart and Kroger, are investing heavily in their online programs. But it must be tougher for the smaller retailers.
Some retailers, smaller retailers, especially retailers that are in the specialty food business, that's a hard one for them because they will very often look at the whole idea of online and say, I have spent decades, sometimes generations, countless time, countless amount of money developing stores that have a differentiated advantage, that are unique stores that people want to come to. And it's really hard for me to get my head around the idea that I'm now going to do something that is going to say to people, you don't have to come to the store. That's a real hard one, and I really respect that. I think the answer is one of two things. First of all, listen, if you've got a great store, you don't necessarily have to be online. You just don't have to be. I was in a store recently out in Portland, Oregon, a brand new store called Provedore. And it's almost like an Italian food hall with about 4 or 5 different vendors. And it's a terrific store. There's no real reason for them to be online. They don't have to do delivery. They've created something really different. So maybe they don't have to do it. But I also think that if they wanted to be online, they could use online to sort of bait the hook to get people into the store. You don't have to sell everything.
While it doesn't get much publicity, some supermarkets are working with Amazon rather than fighting against it.
It makes a lot of sense, especially in the areas of fresh food. And it especially works for companies that do a really good job in fresh food. A business that Amazon is not particularly good at, all right? But if they can kind of provide that service, that delivery service, it makes a lot of sense for the retailer. It also makes a lot of sense for Amazon. The thing that retailers have to be careful about, though, is once Amazon is sort of in there, they're getting your data. They know who your customers are. So you've got to be very careful about the idea. It's a harder thing, I think, if you're just trying to sell things like, tomato sauce, ketchup, salt and pepper, Cheerios, Oreos, that kind of stuff, right? It would worry me a little bit more to do it, simply because once Amazon has sort of its hooks into your customer, Amazon is then able to say, hey, listen, we could sell those people the same thing.
Online allows retailers like Amazon to have an endless inventory. But what about online niche retailers like Dollar Shave Club that focus on just a single category? Is there much of an opportunity for them?
Oh yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there, especially in specific kinds of categories. But if somebody said, listen, I can come up with a private label alternative to Tide, and I'm going to sell it, I'm only going to sell it in, 2-gallon jugs, and I'm going to sell 2 varieties. I'm going to, the allergen type and the regular kind. That's it. But I'm going to sell it at half the price, and that's all it's going to be. And you can sign up as a club. We're gonna kind of adopt the subscribe and save model, and that's it. That's all we're gonna do. I could see a business like that being really effective.
Kevin, we've been focusing on Amazon and other online retailers, but they're really just one part of a retail landscape that's changing in many different ways.
Here's what I really believe about brick and mortar stores: that the days where a store could operate and just sort of be a vehicle to sell other people's products, those days are, with some exceptions, gone. You can't do that anymore. You know, most times you can go into a mainstream, middle-of-the-road supermarket and pick one. And if you were blindfolded and standing in the middle of that store and they suddenly took off the blindfold, you'd have no idea where you were. Frankly, if you kept the blindfold on, you wouldn't necessarily even know you were in a supermarket because it didn't really smell like a food store. I think those days are probably coming to an end. I think you have to, if you're in that business, you've got to figure out a way that your brand is really important, even though you are dependent on other brands. But you've got to find products that nobody else has. You've got to find services that nobody else has, or a spin on those services that nobody else has. And so your brand has a competitive advantage, or at least a competitive differentiation, that's going to make a consumer say, I want to go there and not there. Because there are so many theirs to choose from, it's a really tough road.
Sounds like this means a bright future for fresh foods and store brands.
I would think, yeah. I think really good for fresh and really good for private label, which is really good considering when we're doing this interview. But I think that's true. I think that's absolutely true. You've got to find the differences. You have to market around the differences, not around the similarities.
Well, Kevin, it looks like there'll be no shortage of differences in grocery retailing if Amazon is successful. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Anytime.
And thank you for watching this edition of PLMA Live. And join us next month for another exclusive interview.